What's up, Pirates? Wraith and Jim here with AwakenedTCG. Shout out to Code Shogun21 for giving us the idea for today's video. We're basically going to be going over some meta deck list and going over the price ranges on how much you would have to pay, and then we're going to go over some meta decks that are just below that tier 1, maybe tier 1.5, tier 2, and checking out those prices and giving you guys kind of a breakdown of how much it would cost to get into the game. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started.
Yep. So a few things before we start. Just to preface, this is mainly going to be for completely new players getting into the game because we're going over how much it would cost to build these meta decks from scratch. But I know obviously a lot of you guys are going to already have the bulk of the cards in these decks already. So the price isn't going to be exactly the same, but give or take, knowing what you have and knowing what you need, you can kind of use the total cost as a reference. And also, on another note, we are using TCG Player. If you guys do not know what TCG Player is it is the best place to buy cards if you are looking to make a deck. Maybe not for certain specific cards like championship cards and stuff like that. You may be better off on eBay, but for just built like bulk and buying like your standard cards for a deck, TCG Player is definitely the place to go.
Yeah,
But let's
100%.
get in. Yeah, let's get into our first deck here. It is the most expensive of all the ones we have lined up, and by nobody's surprise, it is going to be blue and black Sakazuki, sitting at
And
$378.97.
I mean, to be fair, it is the very best deck on a tier of its own. I would say tier 0.5. I know when we made the Sakazuki video, everyone in the comments was, getting on me for saying it's tier 0 and it's not. Okay, guys, you guys got it. It's tier 0.5, but this deck is clearly the best. So, I mean, a price like this warrants, it to be the best deck. So, but that's still very expensive. Wow.
Yeah, so this is like using the lowest price points possible. We're trying our best to use like the same shops here so we can save on shipping. So if you were to start from scratch, right, 378 is kind of a crazy price to pay. And if you want to be 100% as competitive as possible, unfortunately, this is what you're going to have to pay. Um,
Yeah, and these are pre-tax prices, so this deck here probably goes over $400.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, let's see what's the most expensive card in this deck. What makes
Yeah.
up
So
a
the
good chunk of this
main
price.
the main offender is right here. Borsalino as a four of. We have three here and one here, but they're going for $28, which is the most offensive card here by far. A lot of the
Yeah,
new cards actually aren't that bad. OPO5 got a lot of support, a ton of printing. So there's a lot of cards being sold, which makes the total price of everything go down, like your Lucci's and your Rebecca's and stuff like that. Only $3 and $7 respectively. But these guys, Borsalino and Kuzan, are locked from OPO2, which, as a lot of people know, did not get a ton of support and it got very underprinted for how much people wanted these cards. So
hmm
now this is what people can charge for them because unfortunately there's just no other way to get them.
yeah, no, yeah. I mean, this deck is the best deck, and like we said, if you're starting from zero, this is kind of what you would have to pay to play the very, very best deck. So, I know a lot of you guys watching this channel obviously are into One Piece, so you guys most likely have, some of these cards. And so this is the price range for the best deck, and yeah, let's move on to some of the other top tier decks.
And at number two, we have Purple Luffy. So this one sitting right under Sakazuki is going to be at $346.40. So about, what was that difference? We have about maybe $30 ish
About a
less.
$30 difference.
So basically, if you're looking to play a meta deck and you're in this price range, you don't have to choose between one of these decks. If you want to play Luffy, you can buy this. If you want to play Sakazuki, you can buy that, as long as you're okay with spending around $350. Um, but this deck is interesting because we have a lot of really cheap ones like this Vanilla Poo for 10 cents, and then a lot of big offenders. One in particular, let's see if we can get to it, is going to be Queen here. It's 33.88 a card. And you need four of them. Like, this one is non-negotiable. unfortunately. As you can see, the subtotal of 4 queens is 137 alone, which you'll see when we look at our cheaper decks, is more than one entire deck. So if you're looking for a cheap deck, a deck that's going to save you some money, this is definitely not the one for you, unfortunately.
Yeah, no. So obviously we see that $130. That's over a third of the whole deck. This card, I know there's a lot of people when we make videos about decks, about certain leaders, they always ask, yo, what would you sub out in this deck for this card? Unfortunately, like he said, this is not negotiable. This card here is really needed a 4 of in this deck. It saves you, cycles your hand, it draws you, and it's good in so many different matchups. I think if you have something else in place for this card, you're definitely hurting your matchup spread versus a lot of other leaders. And so this card here, you can't get rid of any of these.
Yeah, a lot of new SRs here. Like this kid is actually really high for a new SR, and a lot of older ones like the Magellan from 03 and the Magellan from 02 and the Poly from 03 are running you a decent amount, and they're 4 of each. By the way, we will have the deck list on screen for all these decks, just in case you guys wanted to try them out before you end up dropping $346 on them.
Yeah.
But next up, we're going to have probably the third best leader, probably tied with a couple other ones. But if you're looking at the most meta decks to build, it's going to be these 3. And this last one is going to be Enel. And Enel is going to be sitting right under Luffy at $339.70. So unfortunately, guys, the best decks are locked at this price point, which sucks. This might be one of the worst times to get in the game. I'm pretty sure this is the most expensive a meta deck has ever been to build at this point in time, just because the older cards now are a lot harder to get, and therefore people can charge a lot more for them.
Yeah, and like so this here we're going to go over Enel, right? It's a yellow deck. I bought the core of this deck and the rest of the cards needed for a Katakuri deck, which is also yellow, at the end of OP03 going into 04, where the cards were already starting to get really higher price, and I got a whole deck for $200. Now we're looking at those same similar cards for over $300. So it just goes to show you that these older cards are just getting more and more expensive, and honestly a reprint is needed. It does call for a reprint of set 1 to 2, maybe even 3, but one thing all these decks have in common is it's always 1-2 cards that are making the decks this expensive, right? It's not a $10 card here, $20 card here, $10 card here. It's $30 card, $40 card, and it really hikes up the price. So yeah, let's go over this Enel deck and see what it has.
Yeah, so this one in particular, a lot of new and cheap cards, especially for running this one, which decides to use the Skypiea package. But let's just look. Everything's pretty decently priced, right? Brulee's a bit much, and then we go boom. Yeah, the Secret Rare Katakuri from OP03 is $60 minimum we could find on TCG for a card. Which is very sad. This one's actually worse than Queen for a 3 of only at $180.99.
That is gonna hurt your wallet.
100% there. And another card which, again, I don't think is negotiable. You need healing in this deck, and Yamato and Katakuri are really the only 2 that can consistently do it.
Yeah, and one thing to note is when we were choosing which deck list in particular to make, for this one in specific, I decided to go with this Skypiea package, which is a lot cheaper, and it only runs 3 Katakuris. Most Enel lists run 4 of, and so just imagine adding another $60, making this even more expensive than Sakazuki, right? So but this deck here is still so much in tier 1, maybe tier 1.5. I have been practicing a lot with Enel, and so I'm struggling on whether I think it is officially a tier 1 deck, but it is very good. It is very good, and I would say it's top 3, top 4 for sure. And so but yeah, these are we just went over the top 3 meta decks, and price points are definitely not beginner friendly, especially if you're trying to get into this game and you don't know if you want to play it or not. And being able to play the meta decks without having to drop this much money is what the sim is for, right? And we're definitely blessed to have a simulator and how good it is. So you can definitely try these decks out without having to spend the money first, right?
Yep, but let's get into the reason why we are showing you this video. Not only do we want to show you how expensive it is to get into the best decks in the meta, there are other decks that are 100% viable and we do think can actually take tournaments. Some less than others, but the price points aren't always this bad. So looking at a deck that we think is actually going to do really good this next set is going to be Red Green Law, the standard Red Green Law. I think this deck is only running one new OPO5 card actually. And this one's going to come out to $173.77. So a little over half of what the other ones were, but definitely, yeah, if it's close to half of what those were, we are looking good.
Yeah, 100%. This is a deck that is still widely used in OPO5, at least in the East. We're not sure yet. We haven't had any tournaments here in the West, so to know if this is going to be prevalent or not. But there were some, laws that definitely did super well in the East. I think the only bad thing about the law is it does kind of lose to Sakazuki, which is the best deck. So it's going to be interesting to see. But if you can avoid that matchup, you're sitting pretty, honestly.
Yep, 100%. Even if they don't say Lucci in that matchup, you can kind of just rush them down.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a winnable matchup. Like, even if they see one Lucci, it's really, you can definitely survive through it as long as you can get a full board and get there and start doing law things. We really think this deck can do good next set. As well as any other old deck like Zoro and Whitebeard. We will have a tier list coming soon, but we think Red is going to make a pretty decent resurgence. Speaking of a red deck, though, this one is not going to be as meta as Law. Honestly, don't think this one could ever take a big tournament. But if you're just going to locals, right, you're not really looking to get great placements at regionals. You're just looking to have fun and still take some games off the top meta decks. This is going to be a really cheap option for you, and that's going to be Bello Betty. The new leader in OPO5 is only going to run you $88.45, so under $100 to build this deck.
Now we're talking.
Now we're talking. So if you're getting into this game completely fresh and Bello Betty looks fun to you, I would totally buy this deck. This is an amazing price point. Mostly for the reason that we only really have new cards. And these new cards that aren't super rares are running you great prices. Even cards like Super Rare Sabo are still under $1.
No, 100%. I think a deck like this is also very, very fun to play with because this deck in particular is very aggro. It's probably the most aggro deck that you can play in the set. And so if you see a perfect curve and you see good triggers out of life, you can rush your opponent down without them realizing what just happened, right? It'll be the start of turn 4 and they're dead, right? They're going to maybe 7 or 8 Dawn and the game's over, which, is kind of not really a thing in other decks. And so, it's a fun deck. It's cheap. It's definitely in tier 2. I wouldn't ever put this higher than tier 2. But it can definitely still do some damage. And, Sakazuki, funny enough, if they don't see their cards, they're a 4 life leader. You could definitely win that match.
Yep, I have actually extensively tested this list. Not this exact list, a little bit different. But you can totally take games off Sakazuki.
Mm-hmm.
If you see your perfect curve and they can't remove your first card that you play, like on turn 3 or 3 or 4 Dawn, and they can't slow you down right away, that you go set off the Jets and you can totally end a game really quickly. But yep, that is going to be our last deck here. But overall, guys, yeah, if you want to get into the highest level, unfortunately, as we saw, it is going to be about mid 300s price point if you have none of these cards already. Obviously, if you have some of these, it's not going to be as bad, but as we're seeing, the best decks in the meta do cost a lot, and the middle of the road decks like Law and Betty can actually be pretty cheap. So
yeah, 100%. One thing to note is for OPO6, if you are deciding to get into One Piece and there's a certain deck you want to get, what I would recommend is to get Sakazuki. That deck, And that base of cards is going to still do super well into OPO6 with leaders like Gecko Moria in particular, where they're going to use a lot of the same cards. So if you do decide to get in this game and you don't mind spending the money, that is a deck to get to set you up for OPO6 to where you won't have to spend this much money again to buy another fresh deck, right? You can still compete in meta, just buying a couple cards here and there that are required for the new deck. And so that would be my recommendation, is to buy the Sakazuki deck over any other deck. I know Purple Luffy, those cards aren't used as much. Enel, yellow is still pretty good, but it's a different kind of yellow decks, right? So it's still not bad. We're still seeing some yellow as well in OPO6, so that would be my second recommendation if you're not feeling the Sakazuki deck. But yeah, man, you know, these cards are very expensive, so honestly, it is the worst time to get into playing competitively, at least, and trying to get a tier 1 deck and play with that. But for the most part, this game is amazing. It's still fun, regardless of the the price points. You know, I think Bandai should just give us a reprint, so some of these prices do go down, which would be amazing for everybody, not only the collectors to, you know, stock up on more cards they need, but also the competitive players to actually be able to buy decks. All right, Pirates, thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't already, go ahead and check if you're subscribed. Hit that subscribe button. We drop daily videos and they're going to continue to get better and better, so we appreciate you guys. Like this video, comment down below if you think you're going to end up getting one of these decks that we just showcased for you guys. But with that being said, you guys have a wonderful day, and we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace.